Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to talk about Game 4 between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs for obvious reasons, but I also want to get you guys set for Game 5 on Thursday for what could be the game that finally sends the Maple Leafs to the second round of the playoffs. And in order to do that, we need to go back before Game 4 had started, because in the previous video, we were talking about the Maple Leafs possibly making some lineup changes ahead of Monday night's game. Because if you look over the numbers for Game 3, yes, the Maple Leafs did come back and tie this game in dramatic fashion. Yes, they did win in overtime, but they were outchanced in pretty much every single period of play. And that was more of the same in Game 4 as well. This series shifting from Toronto to Tampa Bay really saw the Lightning take advantage of the matchup game and really control the middle of the ice. I know that the Leafs won both of these games, and really that's all that matters in the playoffs, is that you win the games. But at the same time, there were long stretches of both of these games that were very, very frustrating to watch because the Maple Leafs just couldn't get anything going. But despite what we saw in Game 3, the Maple Leafs didn't make any lineup changes ahead of Game 4. And they go into this game and they play probably one of their most miserable, frustrating periods of the entire season, where they got outshot 10-3, outchanced 16-3, and outscored 2-0. Really, in looking back on that period, they were quite lucky it was only 2-0, because the only clean entry that they had got into the Lightning zone in that period, I believe, came from Matthew Knies. By the end of that period, we had seen the Maple Leafs basically employ the same strategy over the last 4 periods, which was try again, and continuously fail, even though, like I said, they won the previous game, and I'm happy with that, but it doesn't mean that the hockey wasn't frustrating to watch. And then in that second period, we did see some adjustments, right? Matthew Knies started playing with John Tavares and Mitch Marner. William Nylander was up with Austin Matthews and Calle Yarncroke, and the Maple Leafs were free-flowing a little bit more. They were getting some stuff going in the offensive zone, and it led to them actually scoring a goal. But the Lightning had scored 2 more in that period, and they were up 4-1 by the end of it, and things were looking real bleak at this point. And at this point, there is blame flying absolutely everywhere, right? There's people blaming Sheldon Keefe for not making the necessary adjustments between games, or even in that first period. There's people blaming Kyle Dubas, because there always is. There's people blaming Justin Holl because he's been on the ice for 11 goals against so far in this series in all situations. There's people blaming Matthews and Marner, even though Marner's leading the playoffs in points, and he was heading into this game, for not having that killer instinct. And then the broadcast flashed this stat up on the screen, and I had never felt more empty in my life. The Leafs are 1-17 in playoff games where they are leading the series over the last 18 games. They squander and bottle every single opportunity they have to go up big in a series or to close things out. Like, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was 1-17 bad. Let's move on. This is making me real sad. And then we did move on, and the Leafs responded in exactly the way that you would have wanted them to, just like they did after Game 1 in Game 2. You get 2 goals from Austin Matthews in that period. You have Marner assisting on 2 of them. They're both involved in every single goal that went in on the ice there. And this game is tied 4-4. And people are screaming, it's 4-1. Other people are screaming back, don't say it just yet. It's not, it was 4-1 unless they win. And nobody really knows what to do. And just so it doesn't get lost, after a miserable start to the game where he took the tripping penalty that led to the Lightning 1-0 goal, William Nylander also had 2 assists, and was a big factor in the Maple Leafs comeback, and was a big reason why they had even won the game. Off the face-off, the effort that he had to get to the front of the net, I think he was going to score if Mikhail Sergachev didn't end up tripping him up there, but he was a lot better in this game as well. And I think the panel said it best. That 4-4 goal that Morgan Rielly scored, I don't think that shot was strong enough to have dented a car door, but it still found a way to beat Andrei Vasilevskiy. And, we've been talking about Vasilevskiy and his struggles so far in this series. He has not been good in this series, but also against the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs. But The Sportsnet panel has had Derek Lalonde, the head coach of the Red Wings, on during Leaf games because he used to be an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And he had mentioned going into that overtime that they had did a study and found that Andre Vasilevskiy was actually one of the lower percentage goalies in the NHL in terms of finding pucks from the point. And when he had said this, you start thinking about all the goals that the Leafs have scored in this series, but more specifically in this game. And the first one was a point shot that was tipped. The second one was a laser beam from Austin Matthews. The third one was a point shot that was tipped. The fourth one was a point shot that went clean in. And even the OT winner was another point shot that was tipped. And typically, the Maple Leafs want to generate as much offense from the slot as possible because those are the highest percentage shots that you could take. And this is where the numbers don't really matter as much, and you got to really pay attention to the games because when utilized properly, when in the right context, a shot from the point can be really dangerous, especially if the goalie that you're facing doesn't handle them very well. And clearly, the Maple Leafs knew this heading into this series. So when we go through this game and we're seeing that Andre Vasilevskiy has a career save percentage through 11 playoff games against the Leafs of 882, that's not bad luck. That's not Vasilevskiy playing poorly. I guess it sort of is, but it's the Maple Leafs playing well. And I think they really deserve a lot of credit here. And trust me, the craziness, the ridiculousness of this situation is not lost on me. It is Wednesday when I'm filming this, and I still woke up this morning with a smile on my face, even though this happened on Monday night. I was absolutely losing my mind while this was happening, and I was watching the game with one of my best friends. I've known him since I was 4 years old, and the last Maple Leaf playoff game that just him and I had watched together was Game 4 against the Columbus Blue Jackets in the bubble, the game where they came back down 3-0 and won 4-3 in overtime. And after the game had ended, I just got up and I gave him a hug. He's an Oilers fan, even though he'll watch the Leafs. I don't understand people like that. He owns a Leaf jersey and stuff like that. But if it works for him, it works for him. He's got a lot of friends that are Leaf fans. And I said, I don't know what it is, but when me and you are together, good things happen. When I saw this tweet, I knew that it needed to be in a video, and I'm kind of shoehorning it in here, but I don't really care. It's an excuse to talk about Morgan Rielly because he has been absolutely fantastic in this series. I know we've mentioned that a number of times in these videos, but after the season that he had and all the criticism that he got, you got to give him praise when he's playing well, and he's been fantastic. Heading into Game 5 now, there are some things to talk about in terms of the lineup for both teams. The first thing being that Erik Cernak will not play for the Lightning in Game 5. But of course, the talk of the town when it comes to the Maple Leafs and their lineup heading into Game 5 is, will Michael Bunting play, and who comes out in favor of him, because the 3-game suspension is done. And Sheldon Keefe followed that up by saying that whoever does come out of the lineup, it will not be Matthew Knies. He's earned a spot on this team, and rightfully so. The Leafs are outscoring the Lightning 4-1 with him on the ice, and he saved that game on Monday night by pulling that puck off the goal line. And not to mention, he was one of the only Maple Leaf players that can even gain the Lightning zone in that first period. He's been on the ice for some of their biggest goals so far in this series, and he's really fit in extremely well. If we go back to this year's trade deadline, I was very critical of the Maple Leafs' decision to not go out there and get another scoring winger, especially on that left side, because when you look at the depth there, beyond Michael Bunting, it's really thin. And when you look at their last couple of seasons in the playoffs, they've struggled to score goals, especially on the power play, but they seemed kind of content, with the trades that they made, and they made enough of them, but I thought that they could have made one more. But then they put themselves in the most ridiculous cap situation possible down the year, and they had to sign all those ATO goalies. But in looking back at the trade deadline and at those ridiculous cap situations, they made both of those decisions because they really believed in Matthew Knies. And we're seeing it just 6 games into his NHL career. They're slowly giving him more and more responsibility, and he's played well. And for anyone who thinks that Michael Bunting is not going to play in Game 5 for the Maple Leafs, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. There's a 0% chance that he is not in the Game 5 lineup. They're not sitting a guy who scored 23 goals, is very good on the forecheck, and does really good work down low in front of the net in the offensive zone. I understand that he got suspended. I understand that at times throughout this year, it's difficult for him to control himself. I understand that the Lightning may make him a target, but that's why if he does play, you don't put him in the top six and you don't put him next to Matthews and Marner, where those guys aren't going to jump into the fray with him because you don't want those guys to do that. Less is more in this situation, and if he ends up playing a role in the Maple Leafs bottom six, playing between 12 and 15 minutes, I think that's a real healthy sweet spot for a guy that absolutely bleeds blue and no doubt understands the stakes. And I get it. We got bad memories of guys getting suspended in the playoffs and then not being there when we've needed them the most. But I want to believe that Michael Bunting won't do that to us again. And I understand that the Lightning are going to make him a target. I understand that he's more than likely going to have to answer for that hit. And that's why you don't play him in the top six. Less is more when it comes to Michael Bunting, maybe in the playoffs. And who knows? Maybe you get him in a favorable matchup and he pots one and puts everything behind him, and he's just able to play his game a lot more freely. And the Maple Leafs need him to do that. He's a very, very valuable piece to this team. In terms of who comes out of the lineup, I think we already have that answer. Earlier on in the year, when the Maple Leafs were experimenting with going with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen when Ryan O'Reilly was healthy, it was Zach Aston-Reese that was made a healthy scratch over a guy like Sam Lafferty. If I'm being honest with you, between Zach Aston-Reese and Sam Lafferty, I don't really care who comes out of the lineup. I don't really have a preference. That fourth line hasn't necessarily played very well, especially in games 3 and 4 in Tampa, so I do think it could use a bit of a shakeup. So it is going to be one of those two guys, but in the end, this is what having depth looks like, right? Neither of those guys really deserve to be a healthy scratch, but the Maple Leafs have too many good players, and that's not a problem. In terms of the rest of the lineup, I really like what Sheldon Keefe did in Game 2 specifically, in terms of the matchups that he was getting for a guy like John Tavares and who he was playing him with. I felt that Morgan Riley was doing a really good job activating when playing with John Tavares and really getting up in the rush and allowing them to produce a lot more offensively. But if Sheldon Keefe isn't able to get that same matchup in Game 5, I think he needs to make this swap, and Marner needs to play with John Tavares because you need multiple lines going. But I think ideally, when you have home ice and you have last change, you hope that you can get the matchups that you want, and you let Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews do their thing. But I don't want to see another full period of just nonsense where clearly what they're doing is not working and there are no changes. You cannot rely on that buzzer, on that horn to save you so that you can go into the intermission and make some adjustments, I guess. They need to get better at making these adjustments on the fly. I had said that the fourth line hasn't necessarily been that great in this series so far. This third pair, also between Justin Holl and Mark Giordano, the Tampa Bay Lightning ate them alive in games 3 and 4 because they got all the matchups that they wanted, and they were playing Nikita Kucherov up against those two guys, and they didn't really have an answer for him. On home ice, they need to do a better job at finding the right matchups, or they need to split those two guys up entirely. Overall, I'm excited. I know a lot of people are nervous because the Maple Leafs haven't been able to close out a playoff series in the past, but heading into this year's playoffs, I said that I felt that this year's team is different, and I picked them to win. I didn't pick them to win last year against the Lightning. But at the same time, there are a lot of people that say, oh, this year's different. This year's the year. But I felt that way because the Maple Leafs were finding ways to win games all season long. They played 17 games with their third and fourth string goalies. They used 12 different defensemen before the trade deadline because they just had so many injuries. Austin Matthews wasn't at 100% almost all season long. But still, they found a way to be top 5 in the NHL. They found ways to win Game 3, and they found ways to win Game 4. I think that they could do it. I think that they're going to do it. So, make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, go Leafs go.